Good evening and good to have you with us on the weekend edition of the Urban Debate. Modi government's budget 2020 was arguably one of the most anticipated budgets of recent times. The government was under tremendous pressure to come up with solutions to kickstart the economy, to revive the growth that is down and out right now, to resolve a massive job crisis, address the long-standing agrarian issues, while putting the country's economy back on track. Budget 2020 was up against a mammoth challenge. Did it deliver or did it miss on most of these lines? That's the big question. As per the opposition parties, the answer is no, it didn't deliver. While top ministers hail this as a reform-oriented budget that is pro-Janta, the opposition has dismissed it as mere rumbling.
बहुत अच्छा बजट है. इससे अच्छा बजट तो कुछ हो ही नहीं सकता है. हर सेक्शन के लिए है. जो आम आदमी है उसके हक में है. जो SC ST का है, OBC का है, 85,000 करोड़ रुपया जो है दिया गया है. और वो जो ट्राइबल का है उसका भी है 53,000 करोड़ का है. तो कुल मिलाकर के जो टैक्सेस में जो है दिया गया है, छूट दिया गया है, तो हर दृष्टिकोण से अच्छा है.
Well, the main issues facing this country today are unemployment situation as far as the economy is concerned. I didn't see any concrete idea, any strategic idea that would help our youngsters get jobs. I saw a lot of tactical stuff, redundant things. But I didn't see any central idea.
ये प्रैक्टिकल बजट है, परफॉर्मिंग बजट है, ट्रांसफॉर्म करने वाला बजट है और पीपल फ्रेंडली बजट है. ये प्रैक्टिकल बजट, परफॉर्मिंग एक सरकार का एक ट्रांसफॉर्म करने वाला बजट और पीपल फ्रेंडली बजट है. और साथ ही साथ हम लाए हैं तूफान से कश्ती निकाल के. जिस तरह का माहौल और जिस तरह की परिस्थितियां थीं उसमें इस पूरे बजट में गांव, गरीब, किसान, खेत खलियान, नौजवान सभी का ध्यान रखा गया है और देश की अर्थव्यवस्था को मजबूत करने वाला, ताकतवर बनाने वाला बजट है.
इट्स ए totally monotonous rigmarole without having any substances, and simply it is people are being confounded by the intricate economic jargons, and you are witnessing that already the market has been crumbling on.
So what is the final verdict? Is this the game-changing budget that India really needs? Let's ask our panelists. Let's say good evening to Hitesh Jain, spokesperson for the BJP, K. Narayana, National Secretary for the Communist Party of India, Jayati Ghosh, Professor of Economics with the JNU, Ashwini Mahajan, National Co-Convener of the Swadeshi Jagran Manch, and Neerja Chaudhary, Senior Journalist, joins us this evening. Let's begin actually with Jayati Ghosh. Jayati Ghosh, did this budget deliver? And I'm going to just split it into different categories and different pockets. Let's start with unemployment. What's your view on where the budget stands when it comes to addressing the issue of jobs?
Well, I think this budget is a very deep disappointment. In fact, it's so bad that even the stock markets are protesting. But I think particularly it's a disappointment because we are in a state of economic crisis. We have a massive employment crisis. We have massive problem of effective demand. And this budget was expected to do something about all of that. It has really not delivered. It's done a bit of the opposite, I'm afraid. There is nothing in there for job creation, the kind of public spending that could immediately put more money in the hands of ordinary consumers and could generate more jobs directly. That kind of public spending is actually being cut rather than increased. Furthermore, the kinds of areas which would affect people's lives, that would enable them to feel more confident and come out and spend more, that too has not gone up. The other way of doing this is to increase government infrastructure spending, but the government infrastructure spending doesn't really seem to have been increased. A lot of it is actually jumla. A lot of it, of the big public sector investment, is actually money that's being paid to ONGC, to MTNL and BSNL for their 4G and various things like that. So I really do feel that this is a budget that is a massive missed opportunity, and it's a serious problem because we cannot afford at this point any more delays if we want our economy to recover. If we continue on this path, we are heading for a very serious economic crisis because now the global headwinds are severe. And if we actually add to our domestic problems by not being able to cope with these global headwinds, I foresee a very, very bleak future. So I think this is not just a missed opportunity, it's actually something which is creating a tremendous problem for us in the immediate future.
Mr. Ashwini Mahajan, let's talk about unemployment and if the budget has delivered on the expectations of creating more job avenues.
See, there has been a general narrative that nothing can happen in the rural areas. No jobs can be created, no GDP can be, no productivity can increase. But this budget with 16-point agenda has at least shown a will to do something about to address the rural problems and create jobs. You see, jobs cannot be created just like that. In the rural areas, there are so many non-farm activities which can be promoted. And this budget talks about the fisheries of starting or promoting FPOs for fisheries and for horticulture and others. So jobs needs to be created in the rural areas, and that is the possible or the most required thing. The second thing I find in the budget about the job creations is that jobs can be created more in the manufacturing sector. And manufacturing sector has been suffering because in the last 20 years, because of the excessive imports, due to the obsession of the past governments to reduce the tariffs in the name of free trade. This government in the last 2 years has learned the lesson and has started increasing the tariffs and has been saying that, yes, we are protecting the domestic industry. In February 2018, they increased the tariffs, and this has continued. And you see, and this time, on non-essential imports, they have again increased the tariffs on furniture and on medical equipments, and all these things are really going to yield results in terms of manufacturing. This is manufacturing which is required to create jobs in the country. And one good thing I'm finding in the budget is that they are talking about FTAs and, review of FTAs and making FTAs work, free trade agreements work for the country by imposing the rule of origin. Today, what is happening? The Chinese are routing through the Indonesia and the Malaysia, and that has to be stopped. So these are some good points which would create more jobs in the country. This is my take on the budget about job creations.
Okay, let's take the conversation forward. The Neerja Chaudhary, the government has actually come out and also announced that they will create a national recruitment agency for the non-gazetted official posts, that they are going to then have engineers be hired as interns and create internships for them, and a series of similar measures. Apart from laying emphasis on wealth creation and enabling wealth creation and enabling entrepreneurship, these also have to be factored in as ideas for more employment, shouldn't they be?
Look, there are so many things you can say, thoda to a whole section of people on a host of issues also. Recruitment, MSEs, MSMEs, and whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's, a little bit everywhere. DDT gone, etc., etc. So corporate tax for the new startups. So you can, if you list, you can say yes, thoda to everybody. It's like a routine budget. If it was in normal times, you would say, okay, there is the plus and the minus of it. But these are not routine times. And everybody in terms of industry and everybody in the country was waiting to see what the government was going to do through the budget to turn around a very difficult economic situation, a slowdown which the finance minister herself had conceded and acknowledged. Therefore, we've seen, as I was thinking, we've seen few, जैसे कहते हैं ना, at Diwali time, fulchhadi is coming on little, but there's not the big bang that everybody expected, which would change the perception that the government had got a grip on the situation and there was going to be now a turnaround. Maybe a very difficult task, maybe tightrope walk that Nirmala Sitharaman has had to do. She has to please every lot of people, but will it generate the required demand in the economy that everybody has been looking for? And certainly the stock market crashing virtually does not show that the investor is sympathetic to the whole thing.
Well, 1,000 points down on the Sensex.
You know, there's a lot of skepticism today about.
Yes, 1,000 points down on the Sensex,
Yeah,
Hitesh
1,000
Jain.
points down
That
on the
doesn't
Sensex.
seem like an
Therefore,
indication that the animal spirits of the markets are all set to return.
Well, I find it very amusing today that those people who want to criticize the budget are taking the aid of what happened in the stock market today and trying to build an argument that because the Sensex has fallen down, therefore budget is not meeting the aspiration. Now, stock
it's more
market
like
has
even
been
the
on the
Sensex
rise
has
since
fallen down.
September
It's
when
not
the corporate
because
tax
it's
were reduced.
even the Sensex has fallen down.
At that time, when the Sensex, at that time also the same arguments were advanced. Oh, the economy is not this thing and all. So now these people have to choose as to whether stock market is a barometer or whether it is the economy. I mean, they have to choose. So for last 5 months, the same, when the stock market was on the rise, the argument was, well, we do not know, the economy is having a lot of problem, but why stock market is on the rise? And today suddenly now the criticism is coming by looking at the aid of the stock market. But be that as it may. Now, when we look at the budget, now what does the budget aspire? The budget is standing on 3 pillars. Basically, it addresses the structural reforms. It addresses the issues like DDT. It addresses the issues of consumption. One of the biggest demand that was made was that there should be that we must build a case for consumption and the middle class should get the tax benefit. I mean, that was the criticism in 2019 when the budget was presented at that time. Then they said, what is there for the middle class? They have not been given any tax rebate. There should be, I mean, the people who are having the income between 5 lakhs and 15 lakhs, something should be done for them. And here, when you look at the tax slabs now, and if they opt, even without subsidies, a person who is earning up to 15 lakhs rupees straight away stands to gain rupees 78,000. It is very significant benefit that is provided.
Is it because there's a lot of confusion there?
Forgo is a classic case for building the consumption.
Is it because there's a lot of confusion there?
Well, there is no confusion. I don't see any confusion. It's a straightforward calculation.
It's not a straightforward calculation. You've taken away all the exemptions.
Basically, there are 2 regimes.
You've taken away all the exemptions. It barely makes any difference.
That is the choice is available. Those who want to.
Correct. So don't make it sound like it's a great tax relief.
Tanvi, it is very simple. There are 2 regimes.
Yes, there are. But don't make it sound like there's a great tax relief for the middle class.
If you feel that taking exemption is beneficial, opt for that.
Correct. So then it's the same. It's status quo, Mr. Hitesh Jain, except that maybe on one side, I don't have to file so much paperwork. I probably don't need to invest and I can spend all that money in shopping.
There are 2 tax regimes. If you want the benefit of exemption, that is also kept with you. If you feel that you should not, I mean, and I will.
Yes, finish, Mr. Jain.
Well, it is not, I'm surprised to say 2%, but at the end of the day, when you're building the aspirational India, you have to also look at, we have been looking at the case of every year, you're seeing the numbers of tax compliance is getting better and better. There are large number of taxpayers that are being added. Like if you will look even at the GST, the numbers, I mean, more than 16 lakhs people were added in the system and the kind of collections that were coming. So, I mean, you are seeing the better compliance. You cannot just build the argument that only 2% are doing, paying the taxes and therefore we should ignore. That is not the way you have to look at the tax system.
Okay, no. The point here is that let's not try to sell this as if this is some great tax relief that you're bringing in for the taxpayer, for the middle class, or however you want to categorize it, Mr. Hitesh Jain. The jury is still out on how much benefit is going to come in. I can show you multiple calculations that show that between the 2 tax regime, that's not going to be a significant difference. Quick response from Mr. Narayana as well. on how he sees this budget and if he feels it's delivered on the unemployment issue. Mr. Narayana, go ahead, please.
The budget is most reactionary, and this country will go to the negative point. Why? Because this is a FDI on education 10% relaxed, and concession to the corporate companies more, and burden to the common people, and disinvestment in public sectors to mobilize the funds like BSNL and Air India, like that. So they wanted to pool the amount by selling the public sector. How they are going to give employment? And when their banks are closing down and concession, nearly 4.5 lakhs concession given to the corporate companies, then how the country goes to the forward, one thing. Secondly, the purchasing capacity should be the people. But your taxation is GST and the Notebandi, these two programs, Nirmala Sitharaman unable to tell. Is there any benefit on Notebandi? And GST, when you reduce the corporate companies to 15%, when you increase the budget tax on common people, how the common people will be like this? And due to the GST and the Notebandi, how many factories closed down? Nearly 2 lakhs factories closed down. And lakhs of the working people came to the streets. They are unable to do things. And building workers stopped. So industry is going down. Like this, all the employment potential is going down. And this economy is going to the corporate companies. That is why this budget is most reactionary budget. This budget is pro-capital, pro-monopoly, pro-corporate. That's what we want to say. Here, this the public sector selling means it is not because it's selling away the prestige of the country, and in the future the income will be less, and we have to depend on the private sectors, corporate sectors, which is not going to feel the democracy in this country. The economic democracy will not be there. Then politically, what happened? Nirmala Sitharaman nearly 2 hours and 45 minutes spoke ever before this finance minister. But what is use? Bulk of speech and without doing any things to the common people, and only the polemics. When Modi
now, let me assure you, I don't think of all the years and times that we've had
country to go reactionary.
Mr. Narayana, of all the years and times that we've had, I don't think you need to worry about the private sector right now, because the private sector is literally in slumber, and it's the government that's having to bear whatever little weight of the economy that it is able to right now by spending money in infrastructure and elsewhere. But I take your point. And let me talk about GST. And if I can go across to Jayati Ghosh on GST.
How you are selling the public sector, you are selling the public lands, government properties. No, you are selling the public properties, people's properties, and getting that amount and giving the corporate companies concessions. What is this?
Okay. Hitesh, do you want to respond to that? You are selling government companies. Yes. Companies owned by the government, by the people and taxpayers. You're selling the family jewels and then putting that money in the hands and the pockets of the corporate sector. Respond to what the left is saying.
Yes.
Well, you know, this is a standard cliche argument by the left, which they have been giving for so many years.
Yes.
And they have run the state with their policies, and we have seen what has happened. They have lost completely connect with the people. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to understand this budget is also a work in a process. I mean, this is this is the 6th year, and in 2019 we have set an agenda for a $5 trillion economy. I mean, when we are looking at that, we are clearly focused on the target that we are seeking to achieve. So in a way, you have to understand that this is a work in continuous process. But well, the problem with the left is, I think they come with that conventional cliche argument, and good luck to them. I mean, I cannot try and sit and convince with them, because however explanations I will come, they will try to, they are eternal pessimists, and we should leave them to that.
Okay, the one aspect that Mr. Narayana raised about the GST, Jayati Ghosh,
You can't
GST,
give
the
any
way it was
definition.
brought in that at that moment, it did have an impact on the businesses, coupled along with the demonetization. But frankly, what could the government have done now to fix that? How can we tinker around with the GST now?
Well,
No,
there
the
are
GST
many things to
Frankly
be done
speaking,
with
you cannot
GST, and
tinker.
in fact,
It is their
Yes,
argument.
exactly. No, Jayati Ghosh, Jayati Ghosh, yes.
It is their argument that GST has created. On the contrary,
for most
GST
companies
has
to
made
deal
the
with.
business look very
But I
efficient.
want to actually
Nitesh,
take
1
up
minute,
the
please.
issue
I
of
will come to you. Let her
taxation
make a
more
point.
generally.
Yes.
I think what has happened.
Continue, Jayati Ghosh.
I want to take up the issue of taxation more generally, because in fact what we are seeing now is what happened last year. The government is way below targets on its tax revenues, and it is pretending that in the last 3 months of this year, for which we still don't have the data, in fact they're still ongoing, that it's suddenly going to make up all this tax revenue. So its total revenue collections are about 11.5 100,000 crore, and it's suddenly expecting that it's going to do even more than that in the last 3 months of the year. Direct tax collections are supposed to go up by 66% just in the last 3 months of the year, and so on and so forth. So it's making extravagant kinds of guesses about what it will collect, and it will not actually be able to meet these. So just as happened last year, it's actually reducing the tax, it's getting less revenues, and it's going to end up spending less as well in the effort to maintain fiscal discipline.
Okay.
Which means none of the revised estimates that we've been presented with is actually valid. That's the one point. Tanvi, I just want to make one more point, because it's something that's ignored in a lot of the budget discussions. And that is that this is a budget that is deeply unfair to the states. It's actually dramatically reducing the revenue that accrues to the states. By its own admission, it's going from 36% of tax collections last year to only 30% this year, because more and more is collected in the form of cesses and surcharges. And this in turn, combined with the fact that she actually declared in the speech that she will not give the GST compensation of 14% as required from next year, she will simply give whatever she can out of the GST compensation cess, which really means that states are going to be starved of funds. In a situation of domestic recession, the central government itself is not spending, and it is not allowing state governments to spend. You're compounding the problem. The issue of aggregate demand is going to get even worse and worse. So I think the fact that this is a budget that is so unfair to state governments, who actually provide the bulk of the spending that is important for ordinary citizens, that is something that we must take into account.
Fair enough, fair enough. And that point, yes, has been raised about, firstly, the kind of math that is being presented if things are worse. And to top that, to say that the states probably won't get their share of the GST money is going to make things very, very difficult. Mr. Ashwini Mahajan, let me come to you on that aspect about the numbers that are being presented. This was the same debate we had 7 months ago when the July budget was given. We now know that obviously the government was overestimating or knew what the reality was but didn't want to acknowledge it. It's happening one more time. How will anybody then take this kind of a economy vision seriously?
You see, recently Chidambaram ji said that I had also been doing it, but this government is doing it more. So this is the kind of systems which have been built over the years. So I don't want to comment on this because after all we have to accept what the government documents say. But I believe that the government should make all-out efforts to generate sufficient revenues, and we have been suggesting that this revenue is coming down for various reasons. One reason may be a slowdown, but there is another big reason, and we have been raising this issue, that the sectors where the maximum growth is taking place, the e-commerce sector, social media sector, so the tech companies, they are the sectors which are growing, and the government is unable to collect any tax from them. One, the social media and the tech companies, they say that we are not stationed in India. You see, they have significant economic presence, and they should be made to pay tax. Similarly, e-commerce companies are showing that they are incurring losses and therefore should not pay tax. But they are building valuations, and therefore, all over the world, these companies are being, the efforts are being made to tax them. In France, in EU, in OECD countries, this issue has come up, and the government of India should also, rise to the occasion and start collecting taxes. You see, we can't have the cake and eat it too. We have to really impose taxes on these people, and you see, government has to show political will to collect sufficient revenues. And on GST front, there has been a lot of cases of wrong, fake invoicing and other things.
Correct.
That is also eating away our GST revenue, and the government should make all-out efforts to meet the numbers which they are announcing.
Okay, let's move on to a larger conversation of the messaging that's coming through here, Nija Chaudhary.
About taxing multinationals.
Yes, Nija Chaudhary, let's talk about the messaging that the government has put forward here. You said, in your opening remarks that there is a little bit for everyone, but nothing, no big bang announcement or reform coming through. Has the government missed even that opportunity, politically speaking?
I think so. See, you are targeting different groups. Okay, that's fine. What was the central thing that everybody is worried about? And that central thing will have a bearing on the politics, the future politics of this government and of the ruling party, with various important elections coming down the line. And if there's going to be economic hardship growing, then that is going to get hit in a very bad way. And one would have thought that, employment and generation of demand, you have to put money in the hands of people for them to spend, for industry to make it worthwhile for them to invest and generate the goods. I mean, I'm not an economist, but that is simply very clear to me. And has the budget moved in that direction? I don't know. That question doesn't get answered. And I think, as I said earlier, in normal times, you would have got away with it. But these are not normal times. In fact, I was in Bombay recently and people were saying this is the last chance of the government to show that it's serious, it means business about getting a grip over the economy. And I don't think that message, when we talk about the Sensex coming down, my co-panelists referred to it, that doesn't show sympathy on the part of people who are going to invest. If this is coming down so badly, if, as they say, even the Sensex is coming down so badly, how are you going to create the climate, the perception that things are going to be on the mend? And I don't think the budget has quite done that. And it's also a battle of perception that we are going to get on top of the situation.
Okay, so even if we keep the economic announcements aside, even in the battle of perception, Jayati Ghosh, what would you have expected the government to have done to at least send the message across that, no, look, we are serious about the economy and we are going to do something about it?
I think there would have to be a very significant increase in public spending. And this is something everybody has been asking for. Even industrialists, even the IMF agreed that in this period of domestic recession, you have to increase it. And you have to increase it in the areas that have high multiplier effects, employment-intensive activities. So the rural employment guarantee, rural health, education, put money in the hands of farmers, agriculture, spend on agriculture and rural development, spend on urban development, create an employment guarantee in the urban areas. These immediately put spending power in the hands of workers who go out and spend with massive multiplier effects. In addition, spend on infrastructure, create special purpose vehicles that will actually go out there and spend the money. You're doing so much off budget, do something that actually generates growth off budget. These are easily available solutions that have been known for a while, that have been suggested, that have been repeated over and over again over the past 2 years. I'm actually stunned that the government is refusing to do anything on these.
Okay,
Instead,
let me ask
it's
Hitesh
announcing
Jain.
a 16-point program, which is nothing to do with the budget, which really should have been, yeah.
The 16-point program, frankly,
Sorry, go ahead.
for many experts, this looks like more of a vision document than actually, on ground taking some action to fix the problem. But Hitesh Jain, this is a point that has been repeatedly raised today. There was a call for the government to, keep the fiscal deficit boundaries aside because the circumstances are so dire and go all out with the spending to revive the growth. We are at 4.5% to 5% growth levels. What's the sense within the party? Why wasn't that done?
Well, I think let me just address a couple of more issues that have been made. I mean, Nirja is a senior journalist and she is speaking about, like, in one day Sensex falls, and she says that the investors have given their certificate. And like, suppose if the market bounces to 1,000 and 2,000 pounds on 2 days, so does that mean that the business has revived in 2 days? So Sensex can never be the barometer to measure an economy. Sensex have been all-time high. Nifty was at as high as 12,500, 43,000. It has been going between 40 to 43,000. And Sensex has been going between 40 and 43,000, and Nifty is going between 11 and 13,000. Therefore, to use the Sensex as a barometer to measure the economy is something, I mean, the argument is questionable. Now, let me come to the couple of issues on the, since we are on the job creation or how do you boost. Now, we cannot forget the large announcement when the whole around the argument that was made, and particularly from the left of the center or the extreme left, was that it is the manufacturing sector which is in crisis. Manufacturing sector creates the job and we have to incentivize manufacturing sector. Now, we are all aware about the historical tax reform that we introduced for the manufacturing, the tax for the manufacturing sector, which is all-time low. And we have seen, now this is a work in a progress. In continuation of that, today in the budget, there are 2 or 3 announcements that have been made. For example, the government has acknowledged 2 or 3 sectors, electronics, semiconductors, and to encourage mobile manufacturing also. Now, we all know that famous speeches of Rahul Gandhi during the state elections of Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan, where he said there should be made in Bhopal mobile, there should be made in Indore mobile, there should be made in Jaipur mobile. But it's been almost 18 months and not a single manufacturing facility has come in any of the state. But for that, you have to take the measures and you have to create an atmosphere. So now you have a low tax regime. You have the government that will give you a speedy permission and clearance. You have a focused approach towards incentivizing and building the manufacturing sector. And that is where you will see the job creation coming. Now, coming to the infrastructure spending, I think there is no doubt about the manner in which the infrastructure work that has been going on, be it railways or highways, and the commitment of the government to spend close to 1 lakh crore in the infrastructure sector. So I'm surprised as to when people are asked as to what are the imagination or the bold ideas you would have to give. Oh, we have to spend in infrastructure sector, but then you have to read the budget today, and you have to keep your ears open and not keep your eyes shut when the announcements are made that close to 1 lakh crore will be spent in the infrastructure. So when we say the Delhi-Bombay highway will be closed, you are speaking about the Bangalore-Chennai, you are speaking about 100 airports, you are speaking about privatization of ports. Now all this work, do you think this is something like sitting on a laptop, I can manufacture a port or I can manufacture the airport? When you will have the work of 100 airports, ports, highways, obviously this will lead to the job creation and also the spending which will give the stimulus. So you are looking at the manufacture sector, you are looking into this. There is one more important point which I am trying to make, which is very important. Now people used to speak about the farmer. What is the solution? That you give them a loan waiver and you can address the farm crisis. There is one very big important announcement that has been made, that the barren land which are been held by the farmers, you can create solar farms over there and you can sell the electricity. So you have to create a value add. Now, I mean, Mirror now can ridicule, and the panelist on the Mirror now will always be eternal pessimistic, always like questioning. Good luck to them. But there are a lot of positive. It all depends upon how you want to see the aspirations that have been addressed and the steps that have been taken to move towards the target.
Well, I wouldn't, and I usually don't respond to comments that are made about what we do and the kind of coverage we have. But
Well,
I just want to
you guys
respond
are
to you,
used to
Mr. Hitesh
ridiculing. I
Jain.
mean, you don't see positive in anything. I mean, Mirror now has never seen positive in anything. You get the panelist who will only ridicule and always negative and pessimist. Good luck to you people.
Let me just remind you, Mr. Hitesh Jain, that Mirror now has been debating economy for the
counter
past
attack.
year and a half. We've done over 40 debates just on the state of economy, and in almost all 40 of them, you and your party representatives have been in denial, about the slowdown. Your party, for the last 40 debates over 1.5 hours, have been... Now, there's no point in talking over me. I heard you out. Now, you must show the patience to listen to me. Your party needs to start listening to other people. Your party needs to start listening to people.
You cannot say that, what about the 2 marks? That is the approach of the Mirror now.
For 1.5 years, you've been in denial of a slowdown that's constantly been happening. A large unemployment crisis that now stares at our country. The growth rates have gone from 8% last January to 4.5% in November. And you have the audacity to put it on Mirror now for asking the right questions at the right time. Good morning to you and your party for finally waking up to the economic slowdown and admitting we are trying to do something to change it. Our job, Mr. Hitesh Jain, is to not sit here and pat you on your back for you doing your job. My job is to not pat you on your back for doing your job. When you don't do your job, I ask you the questions. Don't expect me to sit here and be that cheering crowd who will praise you for doing your job. This is your job. Your job is to save the economy, revive growth. Your job is to plan a budget that includes everybody from rural to urban, all classes of society. Your job is to ensure that there are jobs that are created. Don't put it on Mirror now if they are your failures. Now, good evening to Mr. Yogendra Yadav, President of Swaraj India, joining us this evening. Mr. Yadav, we've had a series of conversations on what the rural segment and what the farm segment here need. The big question tonight is, has the budget delivered on those expectations? What's your view?
You know, when I heard the budget first, because I heard the speech very, very carefully, I heard all the 16 points mentioned about agriculture. My initial sense was that of a disappointment to say, oh my God, we expected something big. This is the first budget after a long time when right-wing economists and left-wing economists agreed that something needed to be done to rural areas, that money needed to be spent there so that it would revive the economy. So I was really hoping something big would happen about rural areas, rural development, and about agriculture in particular. I was disappointed that it did not happen, but I had not seen the allocations yet. Then I looked at the allocations and my God, that's when I really got a real shock. Because over the years, there has been some discrepancy between what is said in the budget speech and the real allocations. So over the years, we've started doing something which we normally shouldn't do. Normally, every big thing in the table should be said in the budget speech itself. But this time I found the budget speech and the real allocations were diametrically opposed to each other. So this is not only a budget which does not do much for rural areas, which it should have for the revival of economy. This, I would say, declares a war on rural India, on agriculture, on farmers. And I say this for the following specific reasons. And the BJP spokesperson, I would really like to hear his opinion on the following evidence that I present. Number one, the FCI allocation for procurement has been slashed down from 1.5 lakh crore rupees a year last year to 75,000 crore rupees. Now tell me, as big a slash as this 75,000 crore rupees being cut down, would you not expect the finance minister to spend 2 minutes on it to tell the country why this was done? How is it that it's in the interest of the consumers and farmers, both of whom would be hurt by this? Not one word in the budget speech. Was the finance minister trying to dodge? Was she trying to evade this issue? Does it speak something about the budget speech? Second, the two schemes which are meant to ensure that farmers get their price. One is called PM Asha
Budget slashed from 1500 crore rupees to 500 crore rupees. The second is called MIS, which is Market Intervention Scheme. Budget slashed from 3000 to 2000 crore rupees. Third evidence, fertilizer. Fertilizer subsidy was last year about 80,000 crore rupees, has been slashed to 71,000 crore rupees. Fourth evidence, Manrega, the last resort for agricultural labor. The actual expenditure expected for this year is 71,000 crore rupees in the revised estimate. In reality, it will go up to 75 or maybe 78 or something of that kind. And what is the budget allocation for next year? 61,500 crore rupees, 10,000 less than the actual expenditure this year. To my mind, if this is not a war on rural India, how else should I perceive it? So much of talk about unemployment, lovely words, but I don't listen to the birds for budget speech for that. Now, in reality, I put all the various schemes together related to unemployment, and the actual budget allocation has dropped from 7,260 crores last year to 5,300 crore rupees.
If I could just take it issue by issue and ask you to hold on to your points about unemployment for just a bit, and let's just speak about the ones that you made about agriculture and fertilizers. Well, I would simply say the government doesn't have the money. And so these cuts are going to happen across the segment. Perhaps one of the reasons why the government didn't even, and why the finance minister didn't even announce the sectoral allocations, how much had been spent last year and what's the plan for next year in her budget speech. Because like you said, the reality is that they don't have the money. They are going to cut down on all of these aspects. But I will ask Mr. Hitesh Jain to respond. How will we revive the rural economy if such massive spending cuts are made in agriculture, in fertilizer? Hitesh Jain.
So one has to understand that rural economy cannot be just revived by Manrega or by saying where are the employments. Now, employments, you have to create an atmosphere by which you generate the employment and you also boost the income in the rural sector. Now, there are 2 or 3 or 4 very interesting ideas in the budget, which now Mr. Yogendra Yadav will conveniently ignore those. For example, raising the target of fish production. That is the one major idea. Second idea is to ensure the warehousing, the manner in which the industry is growing, and it can create a value-add sector for the barren lands that the farmers can use to, and for the supply chain and other aspects. So you have something like a warehousing idea. Third, the problem the farmers were facing was, for example, the cold chain storage and other things. Apart from that, the perishable commodities were concerned. We saw a lot of arguments that were made as to the loss that was incurred due to the perishable nature of the product. So for that, you had something like basically the schemes or the vision that was laid down as to how to deal with the aspect of the perishable commodities. Now, idea is that at the end of the day, if you want to double the income of the farmer, it is not just going to come only by way of production of crops. You have to allow him an opportunity for value add. For example, the horticulture, one product, one district. And at the end of the day, when we speak about Jan Jan ka budget and Jan Bhagidari, the state government also have to do the job. For example, the center had come with 2 or 3 model laws, and in the last 5 years we have seen, barring few states, most of the states are not interested in carrying out the reforms. So unless and until we do not carry out the structural reforms, it is very easy to come and speak about the rural sector in crisis or give the bhashan and gyan as people give at the Jantar Mantar. But the reality and theoretic vision is something different. You have to be practical, you have to give a practical approach, and that is what one looks at the budget, which Mr. Yogendra Yadav will never speak about horticulture, warehousing, solar farming on the barren land of the farmer to address the perishable issue, the issue of inam, the issue of fish production. So when you will come with so many ideas, that is how you will give the fillip to the rural economy.
So the government has come up with the idea of warehousing and cold storage that it actually promised us in its manifesto in 2013, 2014, before the general elections. But Mr. Yogendra Yadav, it's made it to the budget speech this time. So why are you not factoring that in?
I'm very happy that Mr. Jain has
you
not
have seen
refuted
maximum
any of
investment.
the
I mean, one has
evidence
to
that I
also
had
see the kind of
presented. So
investment
I
that has
take it
come
as given.
in the warehousing
But I will
sector.
now, please, I hope you can hear what I'm saying. I'm glad he has not refuted any of the evidence that I have given, and therefore we take it as given. But I will now say something about things that he mentioned. Warehousing, fishery sector, horticulture. Mr. Jain, it so happens that it is my business to listen to all the agriculture-related speeches. I read all the documents of governments of India, and I look at the allocations. Mr. Jain, for your benefit, this idea of blue revolution is not the first time it's being mentioned. It's being mentioned in almost every budget speech. Please listen to Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman's last speech. Warehousing is one of the oldest worn out ideas in every single agricultural document of Government of India that you can possibly look at. If you think it's a new revolutionary idea introduced this morning, I'm afraid you need to do a little more reading than you have been doing on agriculture. The important thing is, does this budget offer a new mechanism,
Well, Mr. Yogendra Yadav,
a
the
new
fact is, if you are reading all the
new
documents, you should
budgetary
know that
support of a
budget is
kind
always a work in
unprecedented?
progress for this government.
If that is the
we do not
case,
act in silos that we take one idea and forget with and come with another idea. It is a work in progress. You do not ignore. Suppose a blue revolution was there. You have to take steps.
To my mind, the important thing becomes
ensure that the blue revolution.
Okay. Hitesh Jain, let him finish his point, please. Let him finish his point, please. Yes, Yogendra Yadav.
Someone has been ringing a bell for you, Mr. Jain. I thought old ideas can become important if a new mechanism comes. If you give it a fillip, if you give it a budgetary allocation of a kind which has not been seen in the past. Tell me, what is the allocation for blue revolution? I can tell you for white revolution, milk revolution, which the minister spent 3 or 4 minutes talking about, setting new targets for milk production. And you know what? Actually, the allocation for white revolution, milk revolution has gone down. So please do not read or listen to budget speech for its poetry. Yes, I heard Kashmiri, I heard Sanskrit, I heard Tamil, I also heard French, and I absolutely salute my finance minister. But I would like to hear all that in a classroom.
The former Prime Minister said that we spend 1 rupee and only 15 paisa is utilized.
I thought the former Prime Minister had a name which Nirmala Sitharaman did not mention, and you probably find it hard to mention. I thought his name was Rajiv Gandhi. I thought that was a very casual remark that he made, not some of the better things that he possibly said. The important thing is, what is the new mechanism which has been introduced in this budget which would actually do something for the farmers?
You may find it casual because you believe that corruption is always...
You cut 76,000 crore rupees from something. I don't think in your party things they teach you to listen to others.
Casual for you people.
At the basic things that were taught to me were actually, unlike you, I have faced lathis because I opposed corruption. I got a fracture because I opposed corruption.
Right. I don't think...
thrown out of government bodies because I opposed corruption. So I don't want these lessons. I don't think that's what we are debating today.
Yes, and that's not the conversation tonight either. That's not the conversation tonight either.
Because it was, that's right. Yeah, the important thing is that this was a very important budget today. The country faces economic downturn.
Right.
There is a slowdown. The country and the world is worried about what India would do. It was a very significant budget, and it was a very difficult budget because the government's treasury is not actually flowing very much. So I would have expected my finance minister to say to the country, look, it's a difficult situation. Look, I don't have the kind of resources I would have liked to have. Let me tell you what I can do, what I cannot do. What I don't like is sleight of hand. What I don't like is too clever by half. You are unable to do anything for agriculture. You are actually slashing resources for agriculture. And then you give me a 20-minute lecture with 16 points, all trivia, to say I'm doing some great revolution in agriculture. I don't like people who look into my eyes and lie.
Well, I would just say that even if the ideas that have been presented there in that 16-point charter, Mr. Yogendra Yadav, even if those actually begin to get implemented, it would be a beginning. Mr. Ashwini Mahajan wants to make a point, and then I'll go across to Jayati Ghosh for final comments.
But they would need
Mr.
an
Mahajan
allocation.
First. Yes.
So I have been listening to all the debates throughout so many years. I have been listening to debates on budget. Every time there are fixed arguments of the opposition, there are fixed opposition of the ruling party, and that goes on. But the issue here is that, you see, we have seen in the West also, the whole Europe giving doles, the kind of expenditures which are expected, free education, free health, free everything. That's the best thing. If we have enough resources, given the fact that the governments, this government or the future governments, will not be able to, keep on increasing the expenditure on doles and other things. Therefore, we have to. This has been the very idea of Swadeshi Jagran Manch, from which I belong to, that we have to create an infrastructure. We have to empower people so that they can earn for themselves, and we have to come out of this whole idea of giving doles and keep on increasing doles to the people. Yes, our people are poor; they must be helped, but over the years, the government, I will request both the panelists on the ruling party as well as the opposition, start thinking more on these lines instead of, simply going on the idea of spending more and giving free lunch, giving free education, free health. That is required for the poor population, but this has to somewhere stop and ultimately reach a stage where everybody is empowered to get sufficient food, health,
I don't
education,
think, Mr. Ashwini
everything
Mahajan, anybody
in life.
will disagree
so
with you on that
this is my humble
idea.
submission to all. Yeah.
I don't think anybody will disagree with you on that idea that there needs to be a long-term solution for sustainability, even in the agricultural sector. But that doesn't mean that if somebody is dying today, we just abandon them saying, oh no, we're not going to help you out at all. There has to be a short-term solution and then, of course, a long-term solution.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. We have to give it.
Yes, we have to. But unfortunately, political parties don't want to waste that much effort and invest that much money into the sector. It's just easy for them to announce a farm loan waiver closer to an election and then move on from there, which is why we are stuck in this rut. Yes. Final comment from Jayati Ghosh before we wrap this up. Go ahead, please.
Thanks. I just, one point I wanted to add to what Yogendra mentioned about the employment guarantee. In fact, if you just maintain the status quo of the Rural Employment Guarantee Program at the moment and pay all the state governments their dues, you would need a budgetary allocation of 100,000 crore. 100,000 crore, 1 lakh crore. So you have to actually, instead, what you are doing, you're giving 61,000, which means once again, the state governments won't get paid, workers won't get their wages, and that whole mess will get worse and worse. That's a very quick way to revive demand. We're talking about a short-term measure for demand revival. This is absolutely essential just to maintain at current levels that much, obviously much more if you want to increase demand. But the other point I want to make, I want to actually agree with Ashwini Mahajan about the possibility of taxing multinationals. I think that's a very important step that could easily be done by the Government of India. In fact, there is a white paper that the Government of India presented at the International Forum about taxing multinationals, especially digital companies, on the basis of their turnover or their users in India, if they happen to be Facebook and so on and so forth. And it's something that they could do very easily. It's low-hanging fruit. So you have to be thinking of new ways of raising revenue, in addition to actually spending more immediately to generate the economic growth that will in turn give you more revenue in future.
Well, so what really still intrigues me is the choice that the government has made to not... Yes, what really intrigues me, and I take your point, and there could have been more innovative ways of shoring up revenue, shoring up money, but it still intrigues me why the government didn't think it was, prudent to actually, or it was necessary actually, to step up its borrowing, to maybe keep the fiscal deficit target of 3.3 or 3.5 aside for 1 year, for that breakout moment where we need to get the economy going. And the government has chosen, while it is wavering for what was earlier intended, but just by 0.5%. They don't have the money. They may sell LIC or put it on the stock market, they may sell Air India, but it's still not going to be enough because that's how tough the situation is. And the private sector isn't spending money. The consumers aren't spending the money. People are just not spending money, corporates or individuals. The onus was on the government to do that. But the government has chosen to not do that beyond a certain point. Then are there going to be more announcements and perhaps other policy decisions that will enable our economy to get back on track? That remains to be seen. Completely out of time on this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.